Miss Hazel Basinger at her home and at the Trinity Oaks community in Salisbury, North Carolina. Today is January the 28th, 2006. Miss Basinger, Hazel, we appreciate you letting us come and interview you for the Mooresville Museum, and we know that you lived in Mooresville for a long time, and we would like for you to tell us about your life, how you got to Mooresville. We know you weren't born there, and how you came to Mooresville and your life in Mooresville.
Good afternoon. I consider it a privilege to be asked to do this interview, and it's going to be a whole lot of I and me in it, but it's not. I'm not projecting myself. I'm projecting as it was in Mooresville whenever I grew up there. So I will start with the fact that I was born in Cabarrus County, but it was near to the Rowan County line. Listen when I say Rowan County so many times, because part of the backyard of my uncle's house, which is in the same community where my mother and daddy lived at that time, part of it was in Rowan County and part of it was in Cabarrus County. So as I grew up, Mother and Daddy moved to Rowan County. We lived in several different places here until we moved to Faith, a little town of 5 miles from Salisbury. Life there, I started to school there, so most of my memories of Rowan County early on are in and around Faith and Salisbury. As I grew, Daddy decided that Daddy and one of Mother's uncles opened a quarry in Faith. And so Daddy decided then that he wanted inside work, because in quarry work you can't work whenever it's cold or whenever it's rainy or anything like that. He had people working for him, and he could not stand to think that he couldn't give them work. So he left the quarry, sold his part in the quarry, and got a job in a textile plant. He came to Mooresville from North Carolina Finishing Company, and when we came to Mooresville, they brought me to Mooresville whenever I was in the latter part of the 3rd grade. But I actually started to the schools in Mooresville whenever I was in the 4th grade. I went to South School, and in so doing, I learned the neighborhood where we lived, which was not too far from school. And on my way to and from school, we walked at that time, and it wasn't too far, but we would pass by a house on the corner of South Main and an alleyway, so to speak, that had a big board fence around it. I'll come back to that house later. I just wanted to mention it and put it into the concept of this interview whenever I first learned about that house. I went on through the grade schools and to high school, graduated from Mooresville High School, and then I went to Catawba College. Now, I have a certificate from the commercial department of the Moran. As I grew, I became involved in everything. And as whenever we moved to Mooresville, the house that we were going to live in was not quite ready, so we moved into one section of town, and I became familiar with that, and then we moved into another section of town on Wilson Avenue. Now, the first thing that we always did wherever we went was get affiliated with a church. So Daddy started looking around. Lex, my brother, was just 3 months old. So Mother was pretty restricted to home at that time. But Daddy and I started going to the church on the corner 1 block away from where we lived. And it was the Second Presbyterian Church. I got involved with my friends there in the neighborhood and so forth, so I was just very happy with that situation. There was not a pastor at the Lutheran church where Daddy and Mother would move their memberships from Faith Lutheran to Morrisville in the not very far from that time in their life in Morrisville. And whenever they had a seminary student who was supplying for the summer, so he came to see them and encouraged them to come to work. But I was so happy, and Daddy was going to Sunday school and church up at the Second Presbyterian Church. But whenever Reverend C.A. Phillips came to Morrisville as a pastor, the permanent pastor of St. Mark's Lutheran Church, he came down and announced to my parents that he was getting us where we belonged, and that was at St. Mark's Lutheran Church. So that came to pass, and not long after that, and I had to cry a little bit whenever they took me from my friends up to St. Mark's Lutheran Church. St. Mark's Lutheran Church was on the corner of Main and Institute Street, right where the fire station is now. And it was just a small church, and the parsonage was behind the church. Well, one of the first things that I remember them doing whenever I came, and I was 8 years old at this time. Parents came to Morrisville in 1927, and so whenever the house, they decided that they would build a parsonage. So they built a parsonage on the as you entered the church. It was on the right-hand side of the church. Beautiful parsonage, we thought, very big, so forth. But that left a house behind it. Well, Reverend L.E. Blackwelder got up every Sunday morning and built fires in the wintertime, built fires in all the rooms of that house. And also they had a furnace in the church, and he stoked that furnace and got everything ready for the service. And so whenever he is this on? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. They put me in a Sunday school class. Our Sunday school class was not in that building. We were in the choir room of the church. And they put me in a Sunday school class with 5 boys and Hazel. And some of those 5 boys, I can remember 4 of them, but one of them I can't remember who it was. But anyway, I tolerated that, but I wondered if they didn't have any girls around anywhere. But Mrs. Colson was a teacher, and so that year went by, and then we got promoted into Mrs. A.L. Starr's class. Now, Mrs. Starr lived 3 houses up the road, up Main Street from the church. And she got sick, and so she decided that I should come up there, and she would write the lesson down, what she wanted said, and I would read it to the class. So we did that, and then she'd call me and she'd say, "Oh, you don't forget now to come to get what you're going to read for Sunday school." And yes, ma'am. And so she'd call me and she'd say, "I'm feeling pretty good. Why don't you just march the class up here, and we'll have class up at my house?" And I said, "Well, all right." So I'd go in and mark the roll, and depending on whether I read what she'd said or whether I marched us up to her house for Sunday school. And so that went on until we got promoted out of her class. Well, then we got some girls in the class, and that made me a little bit happier. And I got involved in everything in the church, which was the way I usually did things. I was usually very involved. So, but it wound up that whenever it came time for us to move, I was told that I would be the teacher, and I must make up the lessons, and I must be the teacher. So that's how I got started teaching Sunday school.
And how old were you then?
I was possibly 12, 14.
Wow.
And so that was the way that, but I had directions. I didn't do all the curriculum by myself, but I had some directions from the pastor, from the pastor's wife, and so forth and so on. But that was my first experience in teaching Sunday school. Well, another thing too, my daddy, it was not too long until Daddy got on the church council. And so he and Mr. Badger Goodman were ushers, and they took up the offering every Sunday. They decided that I should take the offering home with me and record it and then take it up to Mr. Badger Goodman, who ran a store up on Main Street. So that's what I would do. I would take it home and I would record the amount that we got, and then I take it, and also who gave the contributions for the congregation. And then I'd take it up to him, and he would bank it. And of course, he was the treasurer of the church. One Sunday, I bought me a fur coat. This is whenever I was a teenager. I bought me a fur coat. So I was coming out of church one Sunday with I had a bank bag with me, and one of the church members, I won't call her name, said, some people can afford fur coats. Their daddy takes up offering, and he looks mean at you if you don't put something in the plate, and then she takes it home with her. And said, that's the last we see of it. And said, I just don't know whether or not that's as it should be or not. But anyway, I can understand fur coats from that standpoint. Life in the little church was very rewarding. I joined the choir, and then whenever I went to Lenore Ryan, Alma Baker started doing what I was doing as far as the offerings were concerned. And then whenever I came back from Lenore Ryan, why, somehow or other, Alma passed it back to me. And that was my first indication that sooner or later I would be the financial secretary of St. Mark's Lutheran Church and be responsible for recording the contributions and passing the money on to somebody else. As the congregation grew and we changed pastors, but then they started to talking about that we needed a larger church. But I looked around and we were pretty and back behind the church was houses at that time on down to Church Street, and so we were pretty boxed in, and so they decided that they would move the church someplace else. And so they, Bud Sloop gave the church 8 acres of land over off Fieldstone Road. So they decided that that would be where they would put the church. So that was the motivation of moving from North Main Street and over on off Fieldstone. We left a lot of good memories behind in the little church, and I still chide myself that I did not get me a piece of the stained glass window so I could have it from.
I was going to ask you if you moved the stained glass or were they sold?
We did not have really stained glass. I mean, per se, it was just
amber colored.
of different colors.
Mm-hmm.
But we had over the altar, we had Luther's seal, and so that was moved, and that is in the library. I guess it's still in the library over at St. Mark's. I don't know where it is now, but anyhow, it's still over at St. Mark's. We moved the only thing that had any continuity to it that you could see. That was moved.
Okay, well, Hazel, after you came back to Mooresville after Lenore Ryan, at Lenore Ryan graduated, where did you go to work?
Okay, the first thing I did, somebody came to me and, do you want me to name names? Like,
If you want to, that's fine.
okay. All right. Lloyd Thompson came to me and he said, Hazel, I think that you should go into business for yourself. He said, I think you should start a secretarial thing where you would keep books and do secretarial work for small businesses. And so there was at that time there was a lawyer in town. His name was Bob Giles, and he said, "Okay, I'll furnish the place if you will do my work." So I started doing that, and I was getting along pretty good doing that. But they came to me then and wanted to know if I didn't want to work for Mooresville Mills. And I said, in what capacity? And they said, we need somebody as a payroll clerk in the weaving area. And so I agonized a little bit whether to stick with, and I was doing a lot of work for Tom McKnight, and I was typing his stories. You know, he was an editor of the paper, and he wrote stories. And so I was doing a lot of work for him. Also, I was getting along pretty good. So that was my first challenge of whether I should stay and organize and build on my own business, or whether I should go to work for Mooresville Mills. So I decided that this was a new endeavor in Mooresville. I didn't know that it had ever been done before, but it has turned into, through the years, a very lucrative, a very big business. And but I decided to go with Mooresville Mills, which was, and as I said, I went to work in the weaving payroll area.
And how long did you work for Mooresville Mills? Which became Burlington?
48 years. I worked for the whole thing. Burlington, let's see, first of all it was Mooresville Cotton Mills, then it was Mooresville Mills, and then it was Burlington bought it, and it was Burlington Mills, and then it was Burlington Industries denim plant in Mooresville. And so I stayed with them all the time, but I worked for about 5 different companies really in all of that time. But I decided that I would go with Mooresville Mills. Well, that started. Well, back to before I leave church. Whenever we got over to the church on Fieldstone Road, that was we thought we would rattle around in that church and that we just no way. And they thought that with the balcony and everything that it would seat maybe 300 people. So we thought we'd never, that it was just we had Sunday school rooms that we didn't need and all that stuff. And now I understand that St. Mark's Lutheran Church is possibly nearing to over 900 members, and we fill the church. Can't have but. We have to have 2 services. Can't do everything at one anymore. Can't even have an Easter service. I'm talking as if because I'm still a member of St. Mark's and I'm still interested in the church over there.
So the planners of that church had vision, and they built it big enough for growth for the future.
Right.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Mooresville Mills and then later Burlington Industries. I'm sure that over the years you saw lots of different managers come and go because many people came to Mooresville, worked for Burlington, and then left. Can you tell us about some of those interesting people that you met?
Well, I'll go back here just a little bit because I worked in the payroll area, and they came to me one time. I think this will be interesting. They came to me one day, and whenever Burlington bought it, well, they brought everybody in and said, "Now, is there anything that you want to do? Is there anything that you see? What do you see in yourself for the future? Now, just which way would you like to go?" And at this time, I was still, well, whenever everybody went off to war, when all the men went off to war, I moved out of actual payroll into efficiency manager. An efficiency manager, I was responsible for figuring how much production everybody made and how much of that production was seconds and that kind of thing. So whenever they called in and said, what are you interested in? And I said, well, I want to learn everything that there is to learn. I said, I don't know what's ahead of me. I said, I don't know what's available for me, but I said, I want you to put me down as a person that wants to learn everything that there is to learn. And so they decided that. They came to me and they said, "Okay," said we're going to put incentive work. There are two ways to pay somebody in the textile situation: hourly work and incentive work. Hourly work is an actual amount you're going to get every hour you work. And incentive, it depends on how hard you work and how many kicks you get per hour and so forth, and how much money you're going to make. So they said, we're going to put incentive work on the computer. And said, and we want you to be responsible for feeding the necessary information from the payroll part of it into the computer part of it. And they said, but now you're going to have to keep up your regular work. So you're going to have to do this on the side. I said, I'll do it. I want to do that. And so we talked about putting things on a computer. And whenever we started to break up with what we were talking about, I said, well, I want to make one comment. I'm very interested in being involved in this, but it won't work. There's no way you're going to put that, what all of us who have been doing this manually, there's no way you're going to put it all on the computer. And I'll be happy to have proof it won't work. It worked. And so whenever that was very interesting for me. And so now to get back to life, Mr. Fred Clark was my supervisor at the time, and one day he came to me and he said, I want to talk to you a little bit. And I said, okay. He said, they're wanting you to do something that I don't want you to do. And he says, I don't know whether or not how you're going to feel about it, but I don't want you to do this. And I said, okay. He said, J.C. Ponder wants to talk to you. He was personnel manager at that time. Said, he wants to talk to you. I said, when? He said, right now. And I said, oh, all right. He said, he's in his office waiting on you. So I went down to J.C. Ponder's office. He said, come in, Hazel. And I went in and he said, have a seat. And I sat down and he started pacing the floor. He walked here and he walked there and he came back and he walked around behind me. He said, you want a cup of coffee? I said, no, I just left one sitting on my desk when I came down here. And so he paced some more and I said, JC, I said, evidently you got something on your mind. And I said, you're making me nervous. I said, why don't you just tell me what I'm down here for? And he said, I want to ask you if you'd be interested in transferring from payroll to personnel. And I said, well, what would I be doing in personnel? And he said, well, one person in personnel is leaving and we'd like for you to take her job. And I said, when I looked, I said, I had told T.D. Miller back yonder ways that I was interested in learning everything that there was to learn around here. And I was looking around to see if there was anything that I was interested in. And I thought that I had a better job than that person did. And I thought I was making more money than she's making. And I don't know whether I'd be interested in that or not. He said, we're going to enlarge the personnel department. We're going to enlarge the sales store. Now, the sales store at that time was about 3 boxes of shirts and 3 boxes of socks. And he said, we're going to enlarge that area, and we want you to be involved in that. And he said that I think that you would be interested in what we have in mind. And I said, well, it sounds interesting, but I said, how long do I have to make up my mind whether or not I want to do that? And he said, till in the morning at 10 o'clock. I said, well, you know what I'm going to be doing tonight. I'm going to be doing a lot of heavy thinking, and I'm also going to be going to talk to the person who's leaving out there. So I decided to take a chance and go in personnel. And in personnel is where I met so many people, so many. At that time, they would not allow a personnel manager to stay in a plant more than about 4 years because they thought they would get favorites and that they would favor people and so forth. So through the years, I rubbed shoulders with a whole lot of supervisory personnel and everything else that came through. I don't know, let's see, there was Doc Murdoch, let's see, Fred Wright, Fred Smith, Dave Jones, P.D. Ostwald, Ray Nesbitt. And if I had the time, I could tell you a story about each one of those.
Maybe on another day. Okay, now, when you were living in Mooresville, you lived right behind the library. Is that correct?
I'm gonna.
You want to talk about the library?
I'm gonna get how we got there.
Okay.
But as far as working for Burlington Industries, here again, I came up with, as I said, I came up with getting on the men's side, and so they would say whenever they'd send us out of town to meetings and stuff like that, they would send me off with 7 men in Hazel. Came into St. Mark's Lutheran Church with 5 boys in Hazel. 7 men in Hazel went off to meetings and so forth. Well, back to Mrs. Dewey Dingler, Anna Dingler, lived there on Church Street, facing Maine. And between Thanksgiving and Christmas, Mother and Miss Dingler got together and baked fruitcakes. And so this is in 1939. So they got together to bake their fruitcakes. And as Mother was leaving her house, she said, why don't you folks buy a lot right out here and build a house here and be our neighbors up here? And the lot that she was talking about was behind the library down to Church Street. And you know, the library opened in 1939, so it was right after the library opened. So, Mother went home and told Daddy that those lots were going to be for sale. He said, I like that, because Daddy always wanted to live as close to town as he could. He was raised in the country, but he wanted to live in town. So he found out that a Mr. McNeely on West Wilson Avenue was going to was responsible for the sale of those lots. So he contacted him and told him that he was interested in a lot up there, if they were for sale. He said that they're for sale. And he said, why don't you meet me up there on Daddy's lunch hour the next day? So Daddy met him up there. Well, I was trying to help us get some good neighbors, and I told Christenberry fellow that those lots were going to be for sale. So whenever Daddy and Mr. McNeely got up there to look at the lots, why, he came too. And so he was interested also, and so he said, I think I want that first one. Mr. McNeely said, Jake has the first opportunity for the first one because we've been talking about him. Daddy said, I want it. So that was between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so they started the house. They dug the basement, started digging the basement of that house on July the 5th of 1940. And we moved into the house on November the 20th of 1940. And I turned the keys of the house over to the town on November 15th of 2000. Now, to get back to some of the gyrations that it took for that to happen, Mr. A.L. Broy, Daddy contracted with him to build a house, and so he contracted with 3 others along there, and so he built 4 houses there together. And he went from one to the other. What he did for this house, he went down and came back up, back and forth, and back and forth. So we moved into the place over there. We moved in. We moved on November the 20th, 1940. And Mr. and Mrs. Smiley Eisenhower moved into the 4th house in December of 1940, and Mr. and Mrs. Ernest Christenberry moved into the house next to us in January of 1941, and Mr. and Mrs. Russell Sherrill moved into the 3rd house in February of 1941. So it was a community within itself along there. And the library had been enlarged. I don't know whether a lot of people realize this, but the library had been enlarged one time since it was built. They built on the back of the bay window part. They built that much on, just sort of connected it on the back. And that's the reason that they had to come around outside to get in the basement, because it didn't come out of the library itself. It came in just that part of it. Whenever the town came to me, city manager came to me and asked me if there was any chance that property would be for sale. Incidentally, my mother died February the 23rd of 1998, and Lex, my only sibling, died 2 weeks later. And on March the 15th. So I was completely, I had a sister-in-law, but there's things that you have to do yourself, and so I had decisions to make. I had to decide what I was going to do with myself, and also what I was going to do with that property. And so when they came to me and asked me if I would be interested in selling, would it ever be for sale? And I said, you don't know how on the ball you are, because I'm going to have to do something, and I don't know exactly what it's going to be. And they said, well, we want to expand the library, and we need this property. And I said, well, you're going to have to give me some time, because I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And so other people wanted that property. One man in particular got awfully out of sorts with me because I would not let him have it. But I wanted to do something for the town, so I held on to it and sold it to the town. We closed in August of 2000, and I lived in the house until November the 15th, when I turned the keys over to the town. It was a very rewarding experience to work with the town on, and they realized that I took much less for my property than I could have gotten, because I wanted to think I did something for the town.
That's wonderful,
and
to be commended for that.
And they realized it, and they were really good to me in the changeover and so forth and so on. They gave me privileges and so forth, just to live in the house from August to November, and so forth. So.
And that's when you moved over here to Trinity Oaks Community.
Well, I signed my entrance work on in October the 16th. But see, I had to organize I had to make decisions about what I was going to do to start with, and then I had to redo my whole finances, because Lex was my power of attorney. He was everything. I had to redo everything along that line, and then I also had to organize an auction. I had to decide what I was going to do with what was left over. I had so many decisions to make. So what I did, as I said, I had privileges here, and moved my bedroom, put my bedroom together, and then I would come over here and sleep, get up early the next morning, go to Mooresville, work all day over there in the house, getting everything squared away, come back, sleep here, go back over there every day, work, and so forth and so on. And so one day I was in here and somebody came in the door and I said, is there anybody that knows anything at all about anybody named Hazel Basinger? Her name's been on this door forever and nobody's ever seen her. See, we've got a back entrance out here, and so I'd go in and out the back way. And I stepped out here, I said, here she is. But anyway, but now, I haven't, there's things around town and so forth that were interesting to me and so forth and so on, but I was very involved. I was on the, as I said, I was on the Christian Mission Board. I went over to Genesis and had devotions once a month. I was a Pink Lady, an auxiliary. I was very involved around town also.
I want to go back to that house that you talked about on Main Street with the wooden fence. You tell us about that.
Okay. Whenever it came to light that Lutel Williams, Mrs. S. Clay Williams, was going to put a library. She was going to make a library and going to organize a library, a place for the library in Mooresville. And so that was her home place there on the corner. This house that I walked by, and with the board fence. And so that was my first encounter with the house where the library came, because I either walked down Main Street or walked in front of the house, and whenever I walked up at the side of the house, I walked up by the board fence. And it was the house that was demolished to put the library. It's a house on the corner.
Wow, so you have a really close connection with the library.
All the way from the time it was, that was my first, and this I walked by there going to grammar school. And I met her, and I don't know if she's still living. I don't know if she is or not. I doubt it.
I
don't think she is.
What can you tell us about her? You said you met her.
Yeah, well, whenever the first Friends of the Library day that they had down there where they, I don't know what year that was, Alice. Do you know what year it was whenever they had that? Dedicated the library.
Probably 2001.
Well, but anyway, I had, they had the sold things to eat there, and so we were sitting under a tent. I had lunch with her, and that was my only actual one-on-one encounter with her. But I had known a lot about her, and we had a lot of conversation about where I was and so forth and so on, and my house where it had been, and had seen her at a distance coming in and out, but I didn't really know her except for that one time whenever we ate together, had lunch. I don't know, I had hot dogs or hamburgers on we had lunch together.
Okay, Hazel, is there anything else that you want to tell us about? What were some of the stores that you remember as you walked downtown as a child and as a teenager when you were going to school?
Well, one time whenever I was in grammar school, they were going to have a play, and at this time the only place they had to have a play or anything like that, they were going to, it was up over Belk Store. This is whenever Belk Store was on, as you go up Main Street from South Main to North Main. Belk's was upstairs. Belk's was on the left-hand side in the block there before you get to between Center and Moore. Belk's was in that block upstairs. And they had a vacant place upstairs, and that's where they had get-togethers or community things and so forth. So South School was going to put on a play, and so they were going to. I was supposed to be one of the characters in the play, and I was supposed to be a black maid. And so they were going to put grease paint on my face and make me black. And so Mother, I then happened to mention that at home, and Mother said, no way, because my face, my skin was so sensitive. She said, no way. So they were determined that I was going to do the part, so they took a black stocking and pulled it down over my face and cut me some eyes and a nose and a mouth out. And so I sang down by the riverside while I was dusting. And so whenever got through, they were going to do something else, and they dismissed the characters in the play. So here I went down Main Street. I didn't know what else to do. I guess I must have been about the 5th or 6th grade. I didn't know what else to do, so I just went down Main Street with my black face on. And so got down to Mr. and Liz McNeely that lived there on Main Street, and she was out in the front yard, and she said, little girl. And I looked at her, and she said, who are you anyway? And I said, I said, I'm Hazel Basinger. She said, is that you, Hazel? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, well, you come around here. So she took me around inside the house and showed me off to a couple of people and sent me on home. Anyway, that was my only experience on stage, I guess. Because, but Mother wouldn't see to them doing anything except that. But that was all right with her. But I don't know anything else. Oh, all sorts of funny things happen. But
You mentioned that Belk's was downtown between Center Street and Moore. What were some of the other stores along there that you recall? Do you remember do you remember the hotel?
oh yeah, I remember the hotel.
Okay, well tell us about the hotel.
I remember the hotel. Now the hotel, they had a room inside, but a lot of people that lived in the hotel chose to sit outside on the sidewalk and be a part of going up and down the sidewalk. And so we a lot of times they socialized with the people as they went up and down the sidewalk. There's flowers in the hotel, yes, I can remember that. I'll tell you another funny about, there was no place in town to meet any place except up over the stores there. And Eastern Star met up over a cafe that was about middle ways of the next block up the street. And so they had a jukebox. And then too, they cooked. So in the middle of our Eastern Star meetings, while the jukebox would take off downstairs and the smell of food cooking would come upstairs, so we had to work around some inconveniences, but that was all right because that was the place that we could eat. And and I saw the post office being built up there where the school's offices are now, and also the bank moved from down on Main Street, South Main, up on North Main. And the movie theaters, of course, they're long gone, but the movie theaters were very popular.
How many movie theaters do you remember that there were in Mooresville?
At one time, I remember two. One there where Matt's, there was one there, and then there was one up on the very end of North Main Street up near where furniture store up there is. Not quite that far up, but long in there somewhere was another movie theater. And two. We had two movie theaters. Okay, anything else you can think of?
Anything else you can think of that you want to tell us? You started your life in Rowan County, and
that. And then whenever I decided that I researched 5 retirement communities, 2 in Winston-Salem, 1 in Concord, Pines, and Davidson, and this one. But all along I thought this was where I would be because I was so familiar with, in fact, we came to Salisbury, did most of our shopping, even bought groceries over here. We came over here about every weekend because, whenever we first moved, Mother cried for several months because she was so homesick and lost and everything else because she thought Mooresville was kind of way off yonder somewhere. But anyway, whenever they kidded Mother and Daddy, said if they would have bought anything except a loaf of bread and a handkerchief. I don't know why they picked those 2 things. They came to Salisbury, which was about true. And so whenever we would come over here and go shopping, my daddy would go to the family shoe store and visit with Mr. Phil Levinson, who managed that shoe store while Mother took Lex and me shopping. And so I figured that this was possibly where I'd be, since I knew more about it, since it's affiliated for Lutheran Services for the Aging, and I we'd had literature from over here ever since it started. They had the groundbreaking and everything, and I thought this was where I'd be, but I went along with Joyce Earnhardt. She wanted to research several, and so finally, the one in Concord, and I told my niece, I said, now look, I said, she lives in Concord, one of them lives in Burlington. And I told her, I said, now look, if it means anything to you to have me in Concord, that will settle it. This is where I'll be. And they were fixing to build one in Concord. And I said, I'll be in Concord if it means anything to you. She said, I'm going to say two things. Number one, I want you to be happy, whatever makes you happy. Number two, have car will travel. And I said, okay, are you telling me that if you have to get in a car to come to see me, you'd just as soon drive to Salisbury as to drive across town in Concord? She says, that's what I'm telling you. I said, that settles it. So I told Joyce, I said, I have made up my mind. I am going to Trinity Oaks. Well, now, I said, I have made up my mind. I'm going to Trinity Oaks. And so I started out almost in Rowan, and so I came back to Rowan County in 2000.
Okay, one of the things that we have not talked about are these beautiful dolls that are over here in this curio. And I want you first to tell me about the doll that is here. I'll take pictures later, but I want you to tell the story of the doll that is here on the pink satin pillow.
Okay. All right. That doll was my Christmas present when I was 8 years old. I got that doll and a rocking chair. That was what Santa Claus brought me. And so she got kind of shop worn, and so I knew that Bernice Melker made dolls and also repaired dolls. So I asked Bernice she had already done one for me, and so I asked her if she would redo Betty, and she said she'd be glad to. So, and she's the one that gave the time on this. She said it was 15 years ago that she took that doll, and so she worked her over, and I told her, I said, I want her on with a white dress on with some pink flowers on it, and I said, and I want her asleep on a pink satin pillow. And so she, Judy Justice called me one day and asked me if they could bring it to me, and I said, absolutely. I said, come for lunch. That was here, and that was last year. I don't know exactly what date it was. So they brought her over here, and Bernice had her in that blanket. Well, I thought I'm going to get a pretty basket and put her in a basket, and then I can set her on. And I thought, well, I don't have too much floor space. And what I had seen in the movies and heard other people say is that they had opened the drawer and put the baby in it and so forth. So I decided that I would do that. And so that I do it like that, and then whenever I want to, I fold the blanket over and close the drawer, and then she's safe and sound in the drawer. And it has worked out well because, sometimes whenever I need to bring extra chairs in and everything, she's asleep in the drawer.
What about the other dolls that are here in the curio cabinet? Are they a collection of yours?
Yes. Let me see. Would it help if you turn that light on? You got it?
Mm-hmm, I got her.
Okay. Whenever I was in the Light Brigade, which was the youth of the little people out at Faith Lutheran Church, one time they were going to give a doll to the one that had the most money in their mite box. And a mite box, I don't know whether you know what a mite box is, but anyhow, it's a little box with a hole with a slit in the top where you put money in, and it had a Christian symbol in it. So that the fellow that owned the house we lived in out at Faith, he was not married, and he sort of petted me, and he'd come out there and take me around, walking around. He'd bring his girlfriend out there, and we'd walk around and talk and everything. So he decided that I would have a doll, so he stuffed my mite box. And so I got the doll. And she has on her original clothes, and she is what you call a jointed doll, and she is pretty valuable.
How old do you think she is?
Let's see, this would have been whenever I was about 5.
And you're 87?
Mm-hmm.
So she's 82 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was made in Germany, and she's got markings on her back. Bernice is researching her right now. And incidentally, and you don't want to leave this in there, I know that Betty is worth between 7 and 8. Then here's the name is Alma, because the pastor's wife's name is Alma, so she named Alma. The one on the top shelf's name's Louise. Now, Daddy's favorite name back then was Louise. I don't know how I got named Hazel, but his sister had a baby before he was married, and she let Daddy name her baby, and he named her Loma Louise. But now that doll I played with. She has on her original clothes. Well, Alma has on her original clothes also. But those are her original clothes, and she is what's known as a composition doll. See, her hair's painted on, and her face is painted on, and her hair is pasted on. So she's pretty old also. Now some of the other dolls in there are some that people have brought to me from Hong Kong and from Iran and from different places. And the two on the bottom shelf are from New Orleans, and you know New Orleans was known as Doll City, and I spent the day in New Orleans one day and walked all the way from Mayfair Hotel over to Jackson Square, and so I brought each one of my nieces one of those dolls on the bottom shelf, and they're not very they were just play dolls, but they're pretty old, and I don't know of any others that have got any special history. Some of them are Madeline and Sandra dolls. I don't know any of the rest of them that are.
Well, it's a beautiful collection.
Well, I had a whole lot more in there, but whenever I just kept that many, and I gave the rest of them to my nieces, and I told them I'd go ahead and let them pick out what they wanted out of them. But I had to have Louise and Alma and Daddy. They could have the others, but I needed to have them.
Okay, Hazel, will you tell us about the community center down on South Main Street?
Okay, Dr. and Mrs. Taylor, George Taylor, Dr. and Mrs. George Taylor lived in that house there on the corner. And so whenever they built a house over on East Center, well, the house was empty. So the mill company, it was back whenever it was Mooresville Mills, and they decided that they needed for their employees, they needed a community center. And so they got that house, bought that house from the Taylors, and turned it into a community center. And it was really nice because we met up there, and they had planned entertainment. They hired a fellow who was worked with the children, and had different things, different hours whenever he would have organized play periods. Also, they had a daycare center in the house where they would keep the children of employees while they worked. And then too, they had things for the adults. And I remember one time they had a manless wedding, and my mother was the bride, and so they dressed her up, and she had, I remember the thing that was, this was back in some of my growing up years also, and I remember that it was real funny. And her corsage, they went out into a garden and pulled up a cabbage plant, roots and all. And that was her wedding bouquet. But there was a lot of activity around up there, and they had some tennis courts out back. So that was a good thing. They also had a park across the railroad down there over off of Bronx Street. There was some woods over there, and they had set that up as a park, and they had picnics and everything like that in the summertime over there. And they'd have a contest. They had contests to the one that got a prize that took some material out of the plant and made a dress or made something out of it, and they gave prizes for that. And incidentally, that brings up a point that I didn't mention, the fact that back whenever it was Mortal Cotton Mills, they made gingham, they made towels, they made sheeting, they made just a lot of stuff. And it was the first time that we had any indication that get one of that washcloth there with that rose on. And it was the first time that anybody had ever heard anything about screen printing. And so Lex was involved in that. Lex was in college at the time, and so they set up. They took 3 boys. Okay, and but they took three college boys. Lex was home from college for one summer, and they set up a system, and it was so unusual. As I said, nobody had ever heard tell of screen printing, and you know what happens now. They can screen print anything. But they set up a long table, and they put chemicals in the bottom of it and dye, and then they put a screen over it, and then they pulled it back and forth. Okay, and they set up it would be considered a joke at this time, but they set up a long thing there and ran it, and this was one of the things that they screen printed. And of course, can you see it?
I'm zooming in on it now. I got it. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good.
And they did that on towels and bathcloths. And I've got a whole set of towels that Lex helped do.
That one looks like it's initialed by somebody too, is it?
No, that's got my number for my launder.
Oh.
When I send it to the launder. Okay, but that was a project, and of course they did not go into that full time, but it was very interesting to see that and to think what this has evolved, what screen printing has evolved into now.
Hazel, for the record, tell us where the community center was located.
It was back off of the street. It not set right down close to the street. It was at the corner of South Main and Wilson Avenue.
Okay.
And it was on as you came down from town and turned to the left on Wilson Avenue. It was on your left.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else you want to share with us?
Alice, can you think of anything?
You know anything about when the Mooresville ballpark started? Do you remember it? Moore Park, when they had the ball team and all that?
Okay, let's talk about sports just a little. I don't know how many people remember anybody that has talked about it. The Mooresville had a what do they call it, a farm team with one of the I don't know which ball club it was known nationally, and they had a ballpark across the street there from it was on Broad Street, and it was about down across from where Brawley Avenue turns off of Main and goes back to the left. It was across the street on Broad.
It's now Moore Park.
Now Moore Park, and but you're talking about that one down there on Broad, and they had ball games and they had a lot, and they really had some really outstanding players. I know several came from playing with. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I don't remember. I knew at the time, but I don't remember which national team it was that it was a farm team off of. And they still do that. You know, they still have farm teams.
Can you name any of the players that you knew? Small.
Norman Small. I can.
Hoyt Wilhelm.
Hoyt Wilhelm. I can see a lot of them, but I can't remember. I can't remember who they were.
But the mill sponsored that team. Did the mill sponsor?
Yeah, the mill sponsored the team, and it was really a drawing crowd because everybody went out to the ball games. And that was very, very much. Another thing that I didn't mention, whenever we're in that section of town, there was a place out there. Of course, whenever I went into personnel was on South Main Street, along there in a strip of there was a restaurant down there, O.C. Stone Street. Everybody remembers O.C. Stone Street steaks. And across the street in front of that, in front of where the personnel office was over there, the railroad bank was the railroad was high up and the bank came down like that, and it was known as the front. Everybody went to the front, and the people that went to the front sat on that bank over there so much until they had seats that they sat in, and then all it did was and this was a lot of times, you know, men like to gather and so forth and so on, and it was mostly they'd go out there and just sit and visit with each other and watch the girls go by. It was really almost an institution.
Was that close to Jess's Diner?
Well, Jesse's Diner was on down the street, on Broad Street. Jesse's Diner was down there, and it started out in a house down there. There was some houses between the sign where Southside Church sign on Broad Street along there, and there's some houses in there, and it was in, his diner was in one of those.
Streetcar, wasn't it?
Yeah, he had a streetcar, and then it got, the streetcar got kind of dilapidated, and they moved it into a house along in there. But it was long down in there, and that was on down towards the ballpark. And Jess could cook, and his wife, she helped him cook. And he used to meet us at the gate and bring us food while we were eating. I mean, while we were working, he'd bring us food to the fence, and we'd get a break.
Well, you know, it sounds like that Mooresville Mills really provided a lot for the town. They provided a ball team. They provided a community center for the people that work there. So a lot of the life in Mooresville centered around Mooresville Mills at that time.
Mooresville Mills was the heart of the town, and then we can't get out of this category without mentioning Cascade, because Cascade Mills came, and see, Mooresville, at one time Mooresville had 3 mills. Old number 1 mill
On Church Street.
on Church Street, and then Cascade Mill up north end of town, and then Mooresville Mills down there. And textiles was the heart of Mooresville. It really was. And Mooresville Mills, and they had some really community interested people in their board of directors, and also in their supervisory positions down there and everything like that. And they really were good to their, and looked after them, but not to the extent that they dictated anything to them or anything like that. They, like some people, felt responsible for doing that, but they really were community.
Community minded.
Yes.
They provided housing, didn't they?
Yes. Of course, you had to pay for your house, but you didn't have to pay for any kind of anything that happened to the house. If the house needed roof on it and so forth, well, they put the roof, or if something happened to the plumbing, they took care of that and stuff like that. But I am so glad that mill villages are being recognized now, because that was a great life. It was a great life. Everybody was everybody's family, and it was a good life. So.
Well, Hazel, we certainly do thank you for this interview. We thank you for all the information that you've given us about life in Mooresville, and we appreciate it so much.
You're quite welcome. It was my pleasure. Yes.